I think liquidity cycles will continue. Halvening cycles will probably not, if I had to guess. And of course, we have this power law of adoption, etc. So put all these things together, we now have a very consistent model of Bitcoin. We have a model with an R squared of 95%. We have a great understanding of liquidity cycles. We have a great understanding of why Bitcoin is growing. We have models of adoption.
While the so-called standard model for Bitcoin liquidity appears to be all-inclusive, Fred Krueger has brought up a noteworthy observation. This model seeks to explain the price fluctuations of Bitcoin by combining adoption cycles, volatility, and liquidity. But according to Krueger, liquidity is actually what drives the market, and the price of Bitcoin is more susceptible to changes in the money supply than most people believe. During a recent conversation, Krueger explored the notion that Bitcoin isn't as resistant to the banking system as people think. He emphasized that comprehension of liquidity's current function requires a grasp of traditional financial models from the 1980s, such as those at Salomon Brothers. Is it conceivable that Bitcoin is still connected to existing financial systems, even though it was designed to operate independently of them? Fred Krueger suggests the answer lies in the quants who've embraced this liquidity-driven model, but can we really accept that? In this video, we'll explore his insights and challenge the assumptions surrounding Bitcoin's true nature. Be sure to watch till the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content.
Let's talk about the standard model, and let's start with liquidity, right? Because the most, in a day-to-day basis, I think the thing that could drive the most price is liquidity. And what do I mean by liquidity? Well, broadly, I mean money supply, M2. The main thing is refinancing the debt, right? Because the debt has become such a huge number that the cycles all revolve around refinancing the debt. And these tend to be actually measured as 60-month or 5-year cycles. And where the 5-year number comes is that the average maturity of the debt is about 5 years. So, you know, we've got this 5-year phase to roll over the world debt. And of course, the U.S. is, you know, at the forefront of that with, $30 trillion in debt. That is being issued at different maturities. Now it's being issued really at the short end, but it has an average maturity of 5 years. And as Michael said, the real goal of the real mandate of the Federal Reserve is not to cut on inflation, protect against inflation, or to protect against unemployment. The real mandate of the Fed, the unspoken real mandate of the Fed, is to make sure that the bond market operates and that the Fed, the U.S. government, can tap the bond market for its issuance, right? So anyways, that's the liquidity side of it. Now, as Raoul notes, and in his studies, if you increase the liquidity by 10%, the gold will go up 10%, but Bitcoin will go up 40%. So Bitcoin is extremely sensitive to liquidity. And we saw that there was a fall in liquidity, about a 20% fall, a 10% fall in liquidity from 2022 to 2024. And, the first phase of that caused a real drop in Bitcoin in 2022. And so, that was probably more liquidity driven than halving driven. It was really driven by the liquidity, the Federal Reserve tightening interest rates. So now we have the Fed on our side. We have money printing. We know that as the Fed's pushing, right, Bitcoin's going 4x on that. So that's the liquidity side. Now we have the power law side, completely separate. The power law is really much more of a story of adoption. So we have this new technology, Bitcoin, which is about 1% global adoption right now. So 1% of the world uses Bitcoin as kind of their main savings vehicle right now. I'm one of them. I hope you are as well. If you have been using Bitcoin as your savings vehicle. You've been doing very well recently. So that 1% is growing, right, by roughly the time since the Bitcoin was invented in the Genesis block in 2009 till now, right? So it's been growing for 15 years. And the power law says that as it's growing, as that time since the Genesis block has happened, it's growing at roughly 5.7 power of that time, right? So it's growing at a very high rate, at a rate that is faster than an exponential rate of money supply growth. So money supply growth is growing at 10%. Bitcoin's growing at currently at about 45% compounded annual growth rate, right? So, 4 times faster than the money supply is growing.
Fred Krueger highlights an important result from Howell's most recent analysis, the necessity of ongoing refinancing due to the expanding global debt crisis. He says that because most debt has an average duration of 5 years, there is a typical 5-year cycle of debt refinancing. With trillions of dollars in debt that needs to be rolled over quickly, the United States is up against a formidable opponent. According to Krueger, the implicit responsibility of the Federal Reserve is to guarantee that the bond market runs well, particularly during periods such as these. After that, Krueger turns the topic to Bitcoin and emphasizes how vulnerable it is to fluctuations in liquidity. He makes reference to the well-known saying, "Don't fight the Fed" by Marty Zig, and implies that it applies to Bitcoin in the same way that it does to conventional markets. Fred claims that since money printing is restoring liquidity, Bitcoin may experience a sharp increase in price and even double in value. Let's go back to the interview to learn more from Fred Krueger and understand his thoughts better.
According to Metcalfe's law, it's becoming more useful. There's more people buying into this new money paradigm. And the result of all this is that we have this very, very high growth in Bitcoin price, but it's a high growth with high volatility, right? Now, really hard to understand, to see any rhyme or reason in this volatility when you look at it in just regular space, or only if you look at the price in log space. You really need to look at the price and time since Genesis block in log space, so log space. And then you can measure volatility and you see it's 0.3, which is actually very high, but not so high in log space, right? So, and it's actually dampening a little bit. So we have this very good model now for Bitcoin prices, and let's just call it a historical model, right? We don't need to say it's a predictive model, but we know it's a historical model. The fit is excellent. You can't argue with this. Now, if you try to fit an exponential model to it, you will find the fit is not good. So this model fits the power law. It does not fit the exponential. The data does not fit the exponential, an exponential hypothesis. Actually, at this point, the data does not fit Plan B's model at all. So Plan B's system is invalidated by the data. And I really think we should just drop Plan B, because Plan B was an early model, and a lot of people sort of perceived it as the standard model. They didn't think of it enough. They didn't analyze it enough. And I now think we can discard that model. And we really have this power law model, which is the genesis of a really great model. Now, so if you add in the liquidity model and the power law model, and then we also take into account sort of historically the halvening cycle, right, which was very significant in the first two bull markets of Bitcoin, right? In 2013, when the market when the halvening happened, and these halvenings were very, very significant. They made an enormous amount of difference in terms of supply. Today, not so much, right? We've mined 95% of all Bitcoin, and the halvenings will matter for the miners, but they won't matter so much for Bitcoin holders, because, we're mining right now 450 Bitcoin a day. BlackRock just bought 2,400 Bitcoin, BlackRock and Fidelity and the other ETF provider, but they bought 2,400 Bitcoin yesterday, right? So between Michael Saylor, the ETFs, this is not a question of who's going to buy this extra mining supply. That it's just no longer relevant, and that's just a bad model to have in your head, that there's this finite little amount of new Bitcoin that is, and you know, if that thing drops, it's going to make an enormous difference. It really won't, because if we're mining 450 Bitcoin a day right now, if we drop to 225, which we will next halving, it's not going to make that much difference. Those 200 Bitcoin a day are not going to make a world mountain of difference. So there will not be a supply shock. But there may be a liquidity shock worldwide, and there probably will be in 5 years, because we'll probably go through another liquidity cycle, because we always tend to do that. And so, you know, I think liquidity cycles will continue. Halvening cycles, probably not, if I had to guess. And of course, we have this power law of adoption, etc. So put all these things together, we now have a very consistent model of Bitcoin. We have a model with an R squared of 95%. We have a great understanding of liquidity cycles. We have a great understanding of why Bitcoin is growing. We have models of adoption.
Krueger argues that this model of Bitcoin's price fits a power law, not an exponential curve, debunking the widely discussed Plan B stock-to-flow model. In light of Bitcoin's evolving supply dynamics, Krueger claims that Plan B's model is out of date and no longer fits the data. Since 95% of Bitcoin has already been mined, price-halving cycles that were once thought to be crucial are no longer as important. Rather, the real factors influencing the future price swings of Bitcoin will be liquidity cycles. Although the halving will lower Bitcoin's daily mining output from 450 to 225 coins, as Krueger argues, the market won't be much impacted by this drop in supply. Businesses like Fidelity and BlackRock have demonstrated strong demand and can readily absorb the Bitcoin that is created. On the other hand, it is anticipated that liquidity shocks caused by shifts in the world money supply will influence Bitcoin's price movement considerably more. It would be appropriate to highlight the progress of the Bitcoin price model in the end of the video. Explain how Krueger's observations offer a clear roadmap for comprehending the future of Bitcoin. Also, reinforce that while halving cycles may lose relevance, liquidity cycles will continue to dictate Bitcoin's market behavior. Don't forget to like, subscribe for daily videos like this.